Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. In recent days, Ambassador Maliha Lodhi spoke at the United Nations General Assembly Third Committee meeting about the plight of the people in occupied Kashmir, in Indian occupied Kashmir, but particularly she spoke about the plight of the women and children there. She said that life for the people in Indian occupied Kashmir was to live in an armed cage in the silence of a graveyard. She was referring to the brutal kidnapping and arrest of children and young boys in Indian occupied Kashmir who are often abducted in the middle of the night. Approximately 13,000 children have been detained by the Indian authorities. Some of them have vanished in the middle of the night, never to be even seen again. In addition to that, she spoke about several New York Times articles which highlighted what is happening, the grave issues that are happening in Indian occupied Kashmir, particularly where medical and health services are concerned. Many people are being denied emergency critical health care services in Indian occupied Kashmir. She referred to a mother whose son had passed away because she had been bitten by a snake and could not coordinate the anti-venom for her son on time, which is a very easy thing to find if communications are available and if people are able to find out where this life-giving medicine is to be acquired. So these are some of the major issues that were discussed by Ambassador Maliha Lodhi. We also will be speaking about FATF. Now, this is a very crucial time for Pakistan because on the 14th and 15th of October, Pakistan is going to be presenting its case in Paris with the Financial Action Task Force to give its case about how Pakistan has complied with FATF recommendations and guidelines. The Security and Exchange Commission has released a detailed report about how this compliance has taken place. We will be discussing that in further detail. We will be also talking about World Mental Health Day today that's being observed all over the world and also in Pakistan, where mental health is still a very unspoken issue due to the stigmas attached with the issue, as well as the treatment that people tend to not go towards because of the societal pressures and the stigmas attached to that. And it is reported that 13,000 suicides take place in Pakistan each year. We'll also be discussing the stock market developments today, which have been looking pretty positive recently. I hope it's still the same. So let's meet our guest for today's program. We have with us Air Vice Marshal Ikramullah Bhatti Saab, who is a senior analyst. We also have with us Raja Faisal, who is a senior journalist. Thank you, sir, and both of you for being with us today. Let's first speak about, sir, I'll start with you, that Ambassador Maliha Lodhi has been presenting Kashmir's case in the United Nations very effectively in the recent months, as well as Prime Minister Imran Khan and our Foreign Minister. Now, what she was speaking about was particularly what's happening with women and children in Kashmir and the disappearance of thousands of young boys, 13,000 detained as young as the age of 9, which is absolutely unacceptable anywhere in the world. So what would you like to say about this particular matter?
Well, you see, ever since 5th of August, the day Indians decided to abrogate Article 370 and 35A, Pakistan did launch a diplomatic, political campaign in the world to apprise the world of this illegal, unfair, unjust step that the Indians had taken. And the hallmark of this campaign was the speech of the Prime Minister at the UNGA, in which he did highlight the Indian mentality, which was the motivating or the driving force behind all Indian actions towards the people of Kashmir. And he did point out, and ever since we have also seen that there have been disappearances of young boys from Kashmir as young as 12 or 13 years old. And of course, there's a complete lockdown for the last 65 days. And there's a total curfew, total communication blackout. And people have no access to medicine, food, and important supplies in their household. People have been burying their dead in their courtyards in the house. And I think the briefing by Ambassador Maliha Lodhi is in fact a continued reiteration of what Pakistan is bringing to the world as far as Indian atrocities towards the Kashmiris in the Indian-held Kashmir are concerned.
Right.
And we've seen that this is a continued process, a continued campaign that is going on since 5th of August. And this is a continuation of the same campaign. And now the foreign media, especially the leading newspapers and media houses, even in the US, have started to give coverage to the plight of Kashmiris in the shape of news items, stories, and the editorials even. And she did refer to some of these stories from New York Times, and which in fact gives strength and credence to whatever statements, narrations that he had to offer in our briefing. And
Right.
This is a very positive development as far as the Kashmiris are concerned, that the world is now for once coming alive to their plight, coming alive to the atrocities, the brutalities that the Indian government, Indian security forces are committing in the Indian-held Kashmir. And I'm quite hopeful that this will certainly wake up the world's conscience, and ultimately there will be a change in world opinion, the way how they view it, and that will bear a pressure on the Indian policy, and hopefully the Indians should be able to review their decision and their policy towards Indian-held Kashmir, and the Kashmiris should be able to get some relief.
Right. So, and President Xi also said yesterday that the right and wrong in Kashmir is in the situation is very clear, and he's also said that he's going to keep supporting Pakistan in issues related to its core interests. However, I feel, Raja Faisal, I don't know if you agree with me, that now Pakistan's stance is not at all now about the territorial dispute that we've historically had with India about who should have the legal right over Kashmir. It's now about the whole focus, the entire focus is on the humanitarian plight of the Kashmiris, which is really grave. If anyone sat and read these articles, which I'll get into the detail of, I think nobody can ignore how sad and dire the state of the people there is right now.
You know, first of all, Kashmiris, they are our brethren in kith and kin. And even our lands, they are, you know, attached to each other. Our rivers, they flow from Kashmir. And this naturally we have that link to them. And second thing is that, you know, Pakistan has been standing up for Kashmir since the day one.
Yes.
And is standing and will always stand until they are free. And right now what we are seeing is, I think Ambassador Maliha Lodi, she was supposed to use the word that Kashmir is a sort of open concentration camp right now. You know, like Germany, in Nazi Germany in the 30s, 1930s I'm talking about, the steps they took against the Judaism or Jews, the similar steps are being taken by today's India, under the flag of swastika and under the flags of RSS, and they are committing atrocities against the Muslim, focused on the Muslims. And yes, the atrocities are being committed against Sikh and Christians as well, but the main focus, as the biggest minority they have is the Muslims. So the main focus is on the Muslim. It's not about Kashmir. Kashmir is, you know, somewhere they have army presence of 900,000, and they have illegally annexed it, and it has emerged. But throughout the India right now, Muslims are suffering at the hands of tyrant Modi and his regime, and I think world is watching that. You were talking about the UN addresser of Maliha Lodi. UN itself, that UN, you know, Human Rights Commission, they issued reports, like previous 2 reports. They have condemned India by themselves.
Yes.
Because they are watching it, and they are constantly watching, and they know that atrocities are being committed. But ironically, I don't know why, but United Nations hasn't done enough. The things they were, or the steps they were supposed to take, they haven't done now. And I believe they need to do it. Why? Because if they don't do it, then a genocide, which has already started, because these are the first steps of any genocide. Genocide is only around the corner. Are we supposed to leave all of the Kashmiri people in Kashmir left alone to die at the hands of tyrant India?
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
should we do it, or should we stand against a tyrant India? Why? Because it's not about Pakistan, it's not about Kashmir only, it's about the whole region. Because these people, their mentality, Chanakya mentality, it actually tells them that even the countries adjacent to it, like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan, all of these countries, they are their part,
Yes.
and they claim
Akhand
that.
Bharat,
Exactly.
part of that whole
And are
scheme.
we, I think, even the South Asian countries, they need to think about it. That if it is happening to Kashmir, it might happen to them tomorrow.
Absolutely, because
so are they waiting for that day?
This aggression can spread anywhere.
Exactly.
And naturally, if there's a region that's bleeding in our part of the world, we have to address it, and we have to make sure that it's further bloodshed and further suffering is prevented. Now, when we talk about the plight of women and children in Indian occupied Kashmir, Sir Air Vice Marshal, I just wanted to mention how, okay, the children, teenage boys, some are not even teenagers yet, they're being tortured and detained. The Kashmiri women have a very grave situation because most of their men folk are detained, they're in prisons. So they're not only having to be single mothers, they're having to provide financially for their families, they're having to ensure the safety of their children, which is not there. They're coming in the middle of the night in raids and taking them away. And also they're having to protect themselves from rapes and such atrocities that happen at the hand of the Indian soldiers. So, sir, that this is a very vulnerable segment of society, women and children, and they're left completely unprotected over there at the hands of a 700,000 million now strong army. How disproportionate and unfair is that?
It, of course, is unprecedented in the history of the world, that civilian to military personnel ratio and concentration of such a large number of armed forces in such a confined space is unprecedented. And we continue to hear the words like Kashmir is under siege, and of course it's like a huge concentration camp. And I think Pakistan has come up with a very effective and a very acceptable and very understanding sort of a narrative in which we have started to identify RSS with the Nazi Party of Germany, because the West, the Europeans and the American understand Hitler and his policies very well. They've experienced it, they've seen it, it's there in their mind, it's there in their memory. And when we can very easily correlate the two with a lot of similarities and evidences with historical data, then it becomes quite understandable for them. And for them to understand that how ethnic cleansing and racism is being practiced by this party, and that is what is leading to very grave atrocities and almost an ethnic cleansing in India, where they're saying that they would like to have Hindustan for Hindus only, and they have initiated program in which they are cancelling the citizenship of Muslims. I mean, the term they're using is Ghar Wapsi, like they want the Muslims to leave India or something.
And they've got internment camps for people, Muslims, yes, in Assam.
So
where does this happen in this
yes,
day and age?
So
this is the 21st
when it is correlated with Nazism, it is very easily understood by the West. And it is now that the West is now coming to grips with this very serious situation that is developing in India. And they also see that it is not just affecting the Muslims. I mean, the other minorities are equally affected, the Sikhs or the Christians or the Dalits. Yeah. And I think if the Indians do not rethink, do not realize the grave mistake that they are committing, then they're going to disintegrate, because there is going to be such a lot of resistance that is going to come up, and there are several separatist or secessionist movements already brewing in India. And if they pressurize the minorities so much, then they will all think of resorting to militancy, and it will not be just Kashmir which the Indians will have to tackle militarily. They'll have to do it all over India. Yes. And it will become something out of control.
Yes, exactly.
And it's going to disintegrate India.
Right. And yeah.
And they need to realize this. And I think the world is now understanding this, world is now seeing this, appreciating this as such. And that is why now that we are finding coverage in all the Western media, It's being discussed in print media, it's being discussed on social media, it's being discussed in electronic media. People are talking in think tanks, in their parliaments, the senators, the congressmen, they're all talking about it.
The whole world is talking about it right now.
So I think there's a wake-up call for the Indians to review their policy. And if they do not, it's going to hurt them internally to an extent where it will be probably beyond them to control or manage it.
Right. So as Air Vice Marshal Saab was just saying that Prime Minister Imran Khan also mentioned this at his speech in the UN General Assembly, and in all his speeches he's been saying that India is becoming a little bit arrogant right now because the whole issue is now all over the world. People are talking about it. They can't get away with just saying that, putting up a facade that everything is fine in Kashmir and nothing like this is happening, and denying that anything is happening in India. At the same time, not allowing neutral observers. Just recently they did not allow Senator Chris Van Hollen to go into Indian occupied Kashmir. That is going to be terrible for their image in the United States, because if you're not allowing a sitting US senator to go and see the situation, that shows clearly that you've got something to hide. So this facade that they're showing that everything is fine, plus they've got a border dispute with China going on, the Ladakh region, they're kind of messing around with China as well. So Raja Faisal, would you like to comment on this? Prime Minister Imran Khan said that the arrogance is going to cause them to hurt themselves very badly, just like Air Vice Marshal is saying right now.
Exactly. Here I would like to highlight a very important point which Imran Khan, Prime Minister Imran Khan highlighted at the UNGA addresser. He mentioned that Indians are considered as 1.2 billion market, and that thing Indians, they are taking it like, this gives them confidence that they have, authority to do anything. They can be hegemonic towards anyone because they have the all might. Why? Because all of the Western countries, they want to have economic relations with the Indians. But I think the Prime Minister successfully presented the case, and world has heard Prime Minister. And after that, straight after that, if you notice that right now Indian economy has actually gone down a bit. Why? Because these things do matter. The countries which were having relations, like economic relations with India already, they have to rethink about it. Why? Because they don't want to get labeled tomorrow that while India was busy, staging a genocide, they were having economic relations with them.
Yeah,
exactly. So this is quite important. And yes, you are right that India is trying to play like all confident, and it has authority to legitimize any illegitimate thing in India, be it in Kashmir or elsewhere within India. They will try to do it. Reason being, this is what the RSS stands for. RSS is a party that actually emerged out of a resentment against the Muslims, and out of resentment against the British. They believe that almighty Aryan race was going all well, and suddenly Muslims, they conquered India, and then later on British, they came and they conquered India, and the Hindus, the Aryan Hindus, the Aryan race, they were actually neglected, which is baseless. Why? Because if somebody raises the points about Aryan race, I think me and AVM, we both are Aryan race.
Right.
Reason I'm Chib Rajput and he's Bhatti Rajput.
But you're not looking for world domination.
Yeah, we're not looking for that.
Yes, exactly.
So if that was the case, then we would have been sitting with them, which is not the case. I mean, it's just the psychological thing which has developed. I think Modi and his followers, they're acting psychos.
Absolutely. But it's also backfiring because recently the US Senate panel last week actually attached an amendment to a finance bill requiring India to end the lockdown and the curfew and restore communication. So it's being recognized and there's actually action starting to be taken. Of course, there's the question of the 1.3 billion strong market in India, which all the countries are looking at. But Prime Minister Imran Khan rightly said that you can't just base your relations with the country on trade. You know, it has to be deeper than that. So I'd like to now go into this a little bit more into this New York Times article about this lady who could not get the antivenom for her son. Now, this article goes on to elaborate how thousands of people, hundreds and thousands of people are not getting emergency medical care because of the lack of communication. Now, any of us who've had an elderly person in our homes, we know that you have to be constantly in touch with doctors or any sick person for that matter. So, sir, this is now a medical emergency in Indian occupied Kashmir. It has to be recognized by everybody in the world. As doctors have been protesting. One doctor got arrested for protesting against the communication lockdown because he said we need communication to get to the patients who are critically ill.
Indeed, this is now a very serious humanitarian issue, and a report like this coming out from New York Times certainly has a far bigger readership, and I'm sure this is going to be one of the very important developments as far as availability of relief to the Kashmiris is concerned, because now that we have been talking about 1.2 billion strong market for the world, while it is very attractive for rest of the world to do business with India, despite all this, but tomorrow when the curfew gets lifted and there are international correspondents, news media and relief and health teams visit India and they actually find out the true story, then it is going to be very embarrassing for all these countries who had been doing business or wanting to do business with India despite all these atrocities that had been committed. And they would be the ones who would be responsible for providing relief or confidence or strength to India to continue these atrocities, because any amount of business that they do is going to support and strengthen the Indian mindset in whatever they're doing with the Kashmiris. And all these countries who had been doing business with India in these conditions would have been found to be a party to this entire crisis. And then it is going to be very serious and very embarrassing for them.
Right.
And this is not the time for them to realize this. While the Indians have been claiming to be the biggest democracy, secular country, the fact remains that it is a fascist country. It's no more a democracy, it's a sham.
Exactly,
and the world is now seeing it.
Yeah.
And the entire world now has to think twice before considering this as an interest of their own to do business with a country like this.
Absolutely. So Ambassador Maliha Lodi is going to be, she's called upon the UNICEF to come to the aid of the Kashmiri women and children. Now, one of the things that's happened is that there's a dip in surgeries at Sri Maharaja Hari Singh Hospital in Srinagar. 50% dip in surgeries due to the fact that there are restrictions and drug shortages. And doctors can't reach senior doctors because they have to run around trying to find them because they can't call them on their phones. Some of the critical technicians are not on site who have to be called for particular procedures and surgeries and all, and they have to find them in their homes, and if they're not there or they're out somewhere, they're not able to contact them. So these are extremely alarming situations that people there are having to face. And also, Raja Sahab, I'd like you to comment on that. There's a WhatsApp group called Save Heart Initiative helping to coordinate in cardiac emergencies. This has become defunct because the doctors in Kashmir, they can't use the group anymore because there's no internet. So this is all now being published in the New York Times. Is the world going to allow this, in your opinion, to keep happening?
I think they should not, and I would like to mention here, of course I would not be mentioning the name. I have a very good friend who hails from Srinagar. He's a doctor. Presently he's serving in Saudi Arabia. I am constantly in touch with him, and the things he has told me, as he has doctor friends within who are practicing within Srinagar and Jammu side. I was told by him that the first 5 or 6 days of the illegal annexation were the most bitter. Reason being, the people came out and they showed resistance, and they were fired upon, and people were taken to hospitals, and doctors, they couldn't find a way to go to hospital, reason being barriers after barriers. And the drugs, as you have mentioned, it was not easy to find them, and the people who were already in the critical situations, they were left as it is, and they saw their fate as, they died, and he has mentioned that people are dying, and people are getting buried in their backyards. Why? Because anyone who gets out, he's considered as part of the illegal assembly, and he's fired upon. So this is what is happening in Kashmir right now. It is a humanitarian crisis. World must look into it, and I think if world would not look into it, then there would be dire consequences.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Umar Salim, who's a urologist at the Government Medical College in Srinagar, he was arrested for staging a demonstration to restore phone services. He said, he's now been released. He said that we may not be in a formal prison, but this is nothing less than incarceration. This is a doctor speaking. This is not an activist. This is not a jihadist or freedom fighter. It's a doctor who's trying to save lives. Indian authorities are saying that they're allowing emergency patients to go through the barricades, and they're allowing doctors through. But if ambulances can't get to patients, how are they going to save their lives, sir?
Exactly.
Well, you see, with this ever-increasing pressure by the world on India, now the coverage is now appearing in all leading newspapers, media houses, TV channels. I think the Indians have started to feel the pressure and the heat, and now they're wanting to give some sort of relief, but of course
there's been talk of easing on some of the restrictions.
So I think allowing people to come to the hospital, but of course ambulances not being available, specialists not being available, technicians not being available, medicines not being available, is still not going to help the problem. Yes. And people are still going to suffer, people are still going to die or meet serious
and it's not
conditions.
Acceptable anywhere in the world. And also
and I think unless the curfew is lifted completely and the world media is allowed to go in
and see what's actually
till
happening.
that time, I think the people of Kashmir are not going to get relief.
Yes, and also expectant mothers, they've lost a lot of babies not being able to get to the hospitals. That's also been a very sad situation. Let's move on now to the topic of the FATF meeting approaching now in the middle of October. This is a very crucial matter for Pakistan. India has been trying to get Pakistan blacklisted by the Financial Action Task Force, whereas Pakistan has made every effort to try and comply with FATF's recommendations and guidelines. So, Rajasa, would you like to comment on this? How far have we come, and what do you expect might happen at this Paris meeting?
Well, Pakistan has done more than enough in this year. Why? Because there are certain numbers in which Pakistan did not do anything previously, but since the last year, they have done enough. They have tried to comply with the points which they were given by FATF. And I think the current government, if it carries on doing it, if not now, but next year, Pakistan would be able to do it. To me, as Prime Minister already mentioned in his speech, UNGA speech, that suddenly, as soon as he took the office, he realized that India was busy doing lobbying against Pakistan.
Literally trying to bankrupt Pakistan's economy.
To blacklist Pakistan's economy. And yes, India is actually co-chairing Asia Pacific group of FATF. And of course, the Australians are the main shareholders, permanent shareholders. And India has tried to lobby against Pakistan, which to me, I believe it would not work. Looking at the current situations of India, looking at the current scenario of whatever Pakistan has tried to explain, and the issues which are you know, under question, Pakistan is already addressing them on every level. Even Prime Minister, he discussed the same issues in his UNGA speech.
Right, exactly.
You know, he talked about illegal movement of the money, money laundering. He talked about corruption. He talked about not tariff financing as well. You know, he talked about everything, and he shown to the world that Pakistan is trying its level best to do whatever it takes to you know, counter all of these menaces.
Exactly.
So I believe, you know, Pakistan would successfully fight itself out. Why? Because the things we're talking about, I mean, the problems, if they are created in years and years, they can't go within a year.
Within a matter of days, exactly.
You need a proper time. So there are three possibilities Pakistan can have in coming days. One, getting out of that list, the grey list. Number two, Pakistan would continue in the grey list. Number three, I mean, if India is successful, God forbid, and they will not be, looking at the current scenario, then Pakistan might get you know,
in the blacklist. So, Air Vice Marshal, what do you think? Do you think Pakistan might have a chance of getting out of the grey list at this moment or sometime in the near future?
Well, I think the worst case scenario that Pakistan might continue to stay in the grey list, and the best scenario is that Pakistan can come out of it. But the fact remains that, as was highlighted by the Prime Minister at the UNGA, while countries like Pakistan, the developing countries, they have all experienced a flight of capital to all the developed countries, where the money being transferred like this is always welcomed and encouraged, but no questions are asked over there whether it's a wrongly earned money, it's out of corruption, or it's illegal or whatever. They're always welcome. And whenever the host government or the parent government is wanting to know details, there are hurdles, no details are provided. And even if it is proved that it is an illegal money or ill-gotten money, or it's a black money, and then there are very lengthy procedures and processes and legal battles to be fought to retrieve that money. So while FATF is applicable to countries like Pakistan, how about applying it to countries who are receiving that money?
Absolutely.
Because they're equally party to it.
Sir, just recently somebody I know has flown to the United States, and they were asked at the airport, are you related to any high-level politician or government official? Do you think that's part of all of this process?
I guess as long as he is not carrying any cash on him of an objectionable quantity, I think it's unnecessary harassment. But if he is, then of course it's a very valid question. More so when he declares that he is related to some, you know, well-placed politician or a well-placed government servant, wherein he may have access, or he may become a conduit to carry that money for him. So I think there is now a realization within these countries that they need to monitor and check such like transactions.
Absolutely.
But I think in a way all this is a blessing in disguise for Pakistan, because as far as money laundering is concerned, it has been a menace for our economy for quite a while. And terror financing has been a very serious issue as far as our security arrangement was concerned, or our security threat was concerned. And while Pakistan was taking these steps ever since the APS and incident, ever since we had that National Action Plan, but of course, the FATF procedure did give a huge impetus to all those actions. And now, whatever steps that Pakistan does take in satisfying the conditionalities of FATF, I think they are equally relevant and equally beneficial to Pakistan from economy as well as security point of view. I think it's a blessing in disguise, and I think Pakistan is implementing all those observations, all those steps in all sincerity, because we know they are for our own good, and they are going to eventually benefit us.
Yes, so, and to add to what, sir, you were just saying that the report that's just been released on Wednesday by the SECP, Security and Exchange Commission, it said that the comprehensive guidelines developed by the SECP, it's helped financial institutions to generate 219 suspicious transaction reports. Previously, this is in the last 1 year, as compared to 13 STRs in 8 years. In 8 years, only 13 suspicious transaction reports were generated generated.
work was done before.
And now within 1 year, 219. So this is good for Pakistan as well, right? Raja Sahab, would you like to comment on these developments?
You know, these figures, they are shouting out loud to the world that we have done enough in this year.
I think this is a lot. This is a huge result.
More than enough. And we are still doing.
Yeah.
You know, we are still doing. We are regulating wherever it needs to be, regulate. And within the next year, Pakistan would be in a position to anything you have, any concerns you have, we would be in a position to address that.
Yeah.
And Pakistan would be given, I believe, worst case scenario, as respected AVM has mentioned, that worst case scenario is Pakistan would be, placed in the grey list.
Stay in the grey list, right?
It would be staying in the grey list.
Can you please elaborate a bit? What does this imply for Pakistan if it remains in the grey list? What are the implications for Pakistan? And suppose the worst case scenario, blacklist. What does that mean? What kind of restrictions would Pakistan have to face?
Well, if Pakistan is blacklisted, God forbid, then of course Pakistan would lose a huge chunk of trade which it receives from the Western countries and from Far East and all of the countries which are part of it. The only countries would be doing trade with us which are the most trusted and reliable and brothers of Pakistan. That can happen.
That will be a huge hit on the economy.
And even when we are placed in grey list, still that affects. Why? Because we have clouds of uncertainty on our economy. Why we could not attract the foreign investors in this year? Everything is going perfect in Pakistan right now. Why? Because world is looking at Pakistan as a country that has a leader who is anti-corruption, who is having a anti-corruption drive against
and whose
the
word
corrupt
can
mafias.
be trusted.
Exactly, and he can be trusted. Countries, they are waiting for Pakistan to get out of this grey list. Why? Because they don't want, being an investor, nobody wants, any shadows of uncertainty when he wants to put money somewhere. So that's what the problem is.
And
that's why, if we were not placed in the grey list, the situation of economy of Pakistan would have been very different by now.
Why do you say that?
Reason being in the grey list of FATF, it does affect the countries.
It affects the perception about Pakistan, right? So the Securities and Exchange Commission report has also said that apart from the penalties imposed for non-compliance, there's also, they've suggested remedial measures to financial institutions to follow the guidelines. And the SECP has conducted 167 inspections, and this is purely for anti-money laundering and to counter financing of terrorism. And this includes securities brokers, this includes non-banking financial companies, banks, insurance companies, and high-risk non-profit organizations. This is a lot of work that's been done. And so basically, they've also added a screening software for the financial institutions where they can actually screen proscribed people as well as regulated entities. And the screening process is also linked to the State Bank's financial monitoring unit, so that right away the suspicious activities can be reported. So this is also a huge step, sir. And it's basically, they've taken a risk-based approach on what needs to be reported and what needs to be monitored. So this report is shown that a lot of very comprehensive measures have been taken. So would you like to comment?
Certainly. That is why Pakistan today is standing with confidence that with all this progress that they have achieved in the last couple of months in the implementation of the various conditionalities or guidelines or steps that FATF had identified, which in fact was in Pakistan's own interest, because there was limited transparency, there was very little compliance of rules, regulation and policies within banking institutions, insurance companies and non-profit organizations. So, and this was not only leading to flight of capital or unaccounted black money, but even to loopholes where even terrorists were getting funded out of the same economic practices. So now that SECP has implemented so many of these guidelines, and they've found so many observations, and they have been able to rectify a lot of loopholes which were existing because of non-compliance. I think Pakistan now is far more confident than it was earlier on, and I think in the next meeting that we have in France on this FATF presentation, I think Pakistan stands on a much firm and a much confident ground to
yes,
fare well over there.
And Pakistan has achieved a lot in a relatively small amount of time. I'd like to thank both my guests, Air Vice Marshal Saab and Raja Faisal, for giving us your insights on all the issues. And now we're going to go on and talk about World Mental Health Awareness Day, which is being observed all over the world, as well as in this country, in Pakistan, where mental health is a major issue which is scarcely and hardly ever discussed. So it's a very important thing to discuss, and we're going to show you a package about that right now.
World Mental Health Day was established in 1992 by the World Federation for Mental Health. In some countries around the world, it forms just one part of the larger Mental Illness Awareness Week. This year, the World Federation for Mental Health has decided to make suicide prevention the main theme of World Mental Health Day. Suicidal behavior has existed throughout human history, but due to several complex factors, it has increased gradually in all parts of the world, and in the past few decades has reached alarming statistical levels. Suicide is a global public health problem that deserves the attention of all the actors in the field of mental health, including scientific and professional organizations.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference.
All the difference.
In your kid's life.
Mental health problems ranging from issues like depression and anxiety disorders to conditions like schizophrenia affect millions of people around the world. In fact, according to current statistics, 1 in 4 people will experience some kind of mental health problem during their lifetime, and many more will see friends or family members affected.
You're watching a report about Mental Health Awareness Day today, which is being observed all over the world and in Pakistan. Pakistan has a particularly concerning and alarming rate of suicide, especially amongst the youth. And this is due to the fact that there are a number of factors contributing to that. And this year's Mental Health Awareness Day is focusing on suicide prevention. Basically, in Pakistan, suicide prevention is a huge matter because at the moment, people are very reluctant to go out and seek help for mental health issues because there's a taboo kind of attached to going and sharing one's problems outside of families, etc. This is a cultural issue, and it is highly encouraged that people reach out to people and talk about their mental health problems, and also reach out to people they feel they may be concerned about who may be at risk for suicide. Ask them if they need help and take them to a mental health professional. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's program. I'd like to thank all our viewers for joining us today. And from myself, Sharmeen Ali, and our team at World Today, bye-bye for now. See you next time.